It does look live. Joe, you look very handsome and comfortable today.
I am extremely comfortable, but not so handsome.
Yes. Well, I think you're handsome.
Thank you, honey.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the last installment of the DMO Virtual Summit Series. We're happy that all of you could join us today. We're going to be joined by a lot of really awesome speakers. We've been waiting for this one, I think, the most. We've got Lily Ray here. We've got Roxana. We've got Tanya and Richard, Steve Weedman, and the incomparable Jim Boykin from Internet Marketing Ninjas. So we're really happy to have you guys again. We've got an action-packed show. I think everyone is going to have a great day. By the way, it's also Friday, which means that it's almost wine o'clock at 11 o'clock Arizona time. So we'll be cracking open some bottles of wine. We'll be talking about SEO and the future of search. So, Joe, do we want to talk about Advanced Search Summit Napa?
I think that'd be a good idea, considering it is our premier conference.
Our flagship. So if you guys aren't familiar, we also run a in-person conference every year annually in Napa Valley. Obviously, we had to reschedule for last year due to COVID, but I think we're actually trying to move forward with 2021. So if you're interested in attending our event in Napa, go ahead and click the link down below. You'll see TJ, who's invisible and yet in the ether, has put the link down below. And if you guys are interested in coming out to Napa, we are taking steps to make sure that we remain COVID free and safe. We'll be handing out masks and other personal items to keep you guys safe during the conference, but would love to have you out in Napa. We also have a special discount code for you guys today. So if you're interested in coming, just do DMO Summit 3, the number 3. I'm sure someone will put that in the chat, but if you guys want to get $100 off, all you have to do is buy your tickets now. If we do wind up canceling the event for some reason, everyone will get their money back and you guys don't have to worry about that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first and coveted speaker, Lily Ray, who is from Path Interactive. I'm sure she needs no introduction, of course, but Lily has a great program for us today. And we're happy to have you guys here. So Lily, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super, super excited to be here. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. Awesome. Everybody can see my screen okay? Awesome. I will take that as a yes. Cool. So today I'm going to be talking about who is winning SEO in 2020 and why. So we're going to get into some new proprietary data that I'll be rolling out related to what's really been happening in the search results on the SEO front on Google and why I think that the sites that are performing as well as they are performing that well. So as Jim mentioned, my name is Lily Ray. I'm the director of SEO at Path Interactive. So we're a digital marketing agency based in New York and Nashville. Currently working from home like everybody else, which has been pretty interesting, but lead the team of about 15 awesome SEO professionals and many, many different clients. But this past year, I've kind of become like an SEO meteorologist, I want to say, because I've been doing a lot of reporting back about what's been happening in the search results, as it relates to things like algorithm updates, who's been winning, who's been losing. I have kind of like a whole tool set up to be able to monitor the impacts of a lot of the changes that Google's been making. So if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably seen a lot of this already. Pretty much whenever Google rolls out any type of algorithm update, especially core updates, I get to work, analyzing visibility changes across a lot of different domains. And I use primarily Systrix, which I'll talk about quite a bit today, to monitor visibility changes in the SEO results, see which categories were impacted, any weird anomalies in terms of like visibility spikes or declines or anything like that. I've done a lot of work this year as it relates to coronavirus, which we'll talk about, and how that's impacted organic visibility across a lot of different domains and categories. So we'll get into that as well. But just a brief recap of what has caused major changes to SEO visibility in the past couple of years. So obviously there's all kinds of reasons why things ebb and flow in the search results, but as it relates to like really big changes, And, days when we all wake up and see that we've gained or lost maybe 30, 40, 50% of our traffic. Google's core updates, which roll out, generally speaking, maybe 3 to 5 times per year, much less so in 2020. So far, we've only had 2. But these can cause huge changes in visibility. So starting with the Medic update in August 1st of 2018, and then like a different iteration of that update in 2018, basically starting with those 2, we've seen these enormous core updates roll out over the past couple of years that have really largely been tied into what I talk about all the time, which is EAT, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. It really seems to be the case that Google is prioritizing content that's highly trustworthy, especially on what we call your money, your life, YMYL topics. And also this year, that's all been kind of confounded with coronavirus. So that's also caused pretty enormous changes in the search results. So today we're going to talk about what those changes look like, who's benefited from them. There's obviously the other side of the coin, which is who's lost a lot of visibility this year. I don't necessarily want to go in that direction because it's not really fun to talk about, but there's a lot of losers as well. But today we're going to be focusing on the winners. So what's my methodology for analyzing visibility changes in SEO? So as I mentioned before, I work very closely with a company called Sistrix. They're based in Germany, and they've enabled me with their APIs and everything to be able to analyze visibility changes at scale for basically any domain on the internet. So I have this running list of about 1,500 domains that I analyze between any 2 points in time. So if a core algorithm update rolls out, I like to look before and after to see the impacts of those changes. Obviously, 1,500 domains is like nothing compared to the billions and trillions of pages in Google's index. But to be able to look at some of the big players and see how the algorithm updates are affecting their visibility, we could start to glean some insights about what Google's trying to do with its core updates. I also work closely with SimilarWeb, so I love that tool. And what's really nice about SimilarWeb and the way that I use it for these types of, or for collecting this type of data, is that I actually join SimilarWeb and Sistrix data together. So I can see SimilarWeb is probably the best source of classification of domains. So what categories do the domains fall into? So what I'll do is I'll take the visibility changes of the domains that I'm analyzing, and I'll cross-reference that with SimilarWeb categories to be able to see how different categories are affected in terms of their visibility. I also use Ahrefs, and this is just to cross-reference any visibility changes, as well as to analyze backlinks, of course. Backlinks do absolutely play a huge impact in what happens during core updates and throughout the year, and especially if sites get something like a manual action related to links, that could cause a big visibility decline. So I like to use Ahrefs for that. And then the Wayback Machine, also known as archive.org, is a great tool in my arsenal to be able to just look at what does a website look like at any given point in time, especially as these websites continue to iterate on their SEO process and add a lot of EAT enhancements and things like that. It's really helpful to be able to look at those pages over the course of time. So that's my methodology, and it leads me to having this master list of SEO visibility where I, again, if a core update rolls out, which we're expecting one kind of any day now, it's helpful to be able to see almost like a benchmark of where these sites were before the core update and what their visibility looks like maybe 1 or 2 weeks after, when we can start to see the impacts of what Google's doing. And this also really indicates, whether or not the changes that we've been working on for a lot of our clients and for anybody that's really trying to recover from these core updates, looking at this at scale kind of allows us to see whether what we're doing is working. So it's very important for me to put out some disclaimers about my process here. This is obviously not a perfect process. So one thing to keep in mind is that organic visibility, which I'm going to be talking about a lot today, also known as VI, the visibility index, that's a Sistrix metric, and it's not perfect, but essentially what it does is it monitors the visibility of a given domain against their set of 1 million keywords in the US index. So they have different indexes for different countries. I'm going to be focusing specifically on the US today, and basically just telling you how these domains have done from a visibility index standpoint. So how well are they ranking across the index of 1 million keywords that Sistrix keeps track of on a daily basis. And I also want to put out there that none of these brands that we're talking about today are my clients, so I don't specifically know what's happening, the inner workings of those companies. I don't work on their SEO teams. I haven't led their SEO strategy. So this is speculation. Just want to put that out there. It's just based on my own research and my own experience and what I've found by looking, at these sites. And again, it's a very small sample of websites. These are just speculation. It's not, not first-party information that I'm sharing here. And I am using third-party tools. And the visibility index date change range that I'm looking at is going to be January 1st through October 1st. And then I also always throw into every SEO presentation that correlation is not causation. It's not necessarily relevant here, but people always harp on that. So just want to put that out there just in case. Okay, so with all that being said, who are the big winners this year? So there's a lot of winners, but these are the top 30 across the board in terms of who's gained the most visibility index points on Systrix in the US over the course of the year against that set of 1,500 domains that I've analyzed. So if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably noticed all year I've been talking about Pinterest. We're going to talk about Pinterest a lot today, but they're by far the biggest winner. I'll get into some speculation about why that is, but it's almost alarming how much Pinterest is dominating Google search results this year. So that's something to keep an eye on. Dictionaries, I'm not going to get into that too much. Basically, Google just puts a lot of dictionary results on the search results when things are maybe ambiguous or it thinks that the user is trying to get a definition for something they don't understand. So it's almost like bulk that they add to the search results if the intent is not super clear or if they just literally think that the user needs a definition. So not going to get into that too much. Amazon's been a huge winner. That's been true for many years now, but with COVID, that really accelerated things. They have by far the most visibility they've ever had. And then a couple others that we'll talk about today. You can see some here that are clearly impacted by COVID. So things like Home Depot and Target, Overstock, Etsy, people doing arts and crafts. COVID really did kind of factor into the performance of a lot of these sites, but probably a lot of these are not very surprising to you guys. CDC.gov clearly had a good year. We'll talk about that as well. So in terms of the biggest percentage change in visibility throughout the course of 2020, this is when I thought things started to get kind of interesting. So on the last slide, we saw that Pinterest.com was the biggest winner in the US in terms of raw visibility increase. Now, in terms of percentage change over the course of the year, you can see Pinterest Canada, Pinterest Japan, Pinterest France. I think there's some other Pinterests on here. Yeah, DE, so Germany. TikTok is one of the biggest winners. And then we also have eBay.Canada. So we're going to talk about all these different international CCTLDs that are doing so well in the US index, which I found a little bit puzzling, but there's a lot of weirdness going on with that. Some of the other winners here, so we have like eatthis.com, which is a nutrition and recipe website that's done quite well. We'll talk about them. Diet Doctor, if you follow my talks, I talk about them pretty much every single time. They have some of the best EAT on the internet. So if you're curious how to implement a good EAT strategy, I always recommend looking at Diet Doctor. And then Zoom we'll talk about. So a lot of these aren't super surprising, especially in the context of COVID, but there are some interesting anomalies that I do want to talk about. So we'll get into that. So as I mentioned before, what I do is I cross-reference similar web categories with my Systrix data. So here we have, looking just at the categories, the way that SimilarWeb labels them, which categories have seen the biggest gains and losses in terms of SEO visibility over the course of the year. So unsurprisingly, e-commerce, we're all quarantined, we're staying at home. E-commerce has absolutely surged in visibility. So what this really means is that Google is ranking more e-commerce websites against the set of 1 million keywords that Systrix tracks throughout the course of the year. So Google's algorithms can adjust to changes in search behavior and search intent. And search behavior and intent have changed absolutely drastically this year. And I'll get into some specific examples in a few slides. But if you think about it, Google's results have adjusted for the fact that people are quarantined, they're staying at home, their interests have completely changed, they're unable to do certain things like traveling or going to the opera or whatever the case may be. And the search results actually reflect that. So the biggest losers are arts and entertainment, among some other categories where people just aren't able to partake in those things this year. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So diving into specifically like who won and why I think they won, the topics that we're going to discuss are first the websites that were basically just in the right place at the right time. I think for those of us working in SEO, we probably have, I know I have some clients where it's like, wow, we've had an amazing year, but we didn't really do that much. We were just kind of in the right place at the right time. So there's a lot of that happening this year. Unfortunately, there's the flip side happening as well, where sites have completely lost visibility, which is unfortunate, but we'll talk about those sites. COVID winners, similarly, it's extremely difficult to compete right now because of COVID and the requirements that Google has for good quality content and trustworthy content. So we'll talk about who's succeeding with that. I mentioned before there's some weirdness with CCTLD, so country code top level domains and international versions of domains ranking in the US really, really well. So we'll talk about that. Images, maybe you felt this with your own sites, but Google has been absolutely pushing out increased visibility for images and image websites over the past several months, almost exponentially, which is pretty interesting. We'll also get into EAT winners because it's basically all I talk about lately, but there's a lot of sites that are doing really, really well as far as displaying good expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness, and Google is certainly rewarding that in terms of increasing the visibility of those sites. Then we'll talk about e-commerce and real estate a little bit as well. So the first category I want to dive into is websites that were in the right place at the right time. I shared a couple days ago on Twitter a picture of a huge exponential increase in visibility, and I said, can anybody guess who this website is? A few of you guessed correctly. The answer was Zoom. I think this is a really brilliant example of what can happen with Google's algorithms just by understanding user intent without necessarily rolling out a core update. So if you look here on this chart, these blue letters are Google's core updates. The way Systrix works is that those trigger when it detects within the visibility for this site that a core update affected that site. And you can see here when Zoom started to get all that increased visibility, it actually wasn't a core update. So there's no blue letter there that's denoting a core update rolled out. But what we do have is coronavirus, right? So that was February and March. And Zoom's visibility absolutely skyrocketed during that time. And as I mentioned before, visibility is not traffic. So we're not looking at a pure traffic, chart right now. We're looking at how visible was Zoom in Google search results over the course of time. So what does this actually look like? So this is another feature within Systrix. What you can do is you can take any two date ranges and you can look at what the search results look like before and after. So I took January 6th compared to May 4th. And this is the keyword meetings. So I didn't type virtual meetings. I didn't type online meetings, anything related to COVID. I literally just typed in meetings. So in January, we have Wikipedia talking about meetings. We have the New York Times talking about how to run an effective business meeting. Some other things related to in-person meetings, right? And then on May 4th, we have Zoom literally appearing out of the ether with its meetings page. Right below that, we have Google talking about using Google Meet to run meetings. So even though the user didn't type virtual, they didn't type online, Zoom and other online meeting products dominated the search results. And that was just through Google understanding that people's intent has changed. So if you multiply that by all the different varieties of keywords that people might be using, even without modifiers like virtual or online or anything like that, the search results completely changed to reflect people's new situation during COVID. So there's a lot of websites that have benefited from this type of process. Now, I want to be clear that Home Depot, for example, has a great SEO program. I'm not saying that this is the only reason why they've seen such big gains this year, but as people's demand for products that Home Depot sells has drastically increased throughout the course of the year, it's a cyclical effect where Google's now going to be rewarding Home Depot with higher rankings. Their visibility is going to increase. Same with weed maps. Weed is one of the biggest categories that's seen a huge increase this year. Also rehab, unfortunately, on the flip side. But for anybody that's working in the marijuana space online, you've probably noticed this has been a very good year for your clients in most cases. Smart Air is an air filtration company. So during COVID, they started to skyrocket in visibility, and it's been pretty steady increasing since then. And then Coursera is an interesting example. So this is a company that offers online courses. And similarly, I thought this was really interesting during COVID. So if you type the word art courses in January, you're going to get like museums and colleges and physical institutions where you can go in person and take an art course. And in April, that switched to where Google's now putting Coursera.org and Udemy and edX and these different companies where you can take art courses online. Those are now outranking the museums and everything. And if you visit the museum website, it's like, sorry, we're closed. So it's basically a 404 page or like a soft 404 page. Google's replaced that with art courses that you can take online. So this is just one of many different examples that I found where the search results are changing to reflect people's new situation, even though the query itself doesn't include like, I'm stuck at home or virtual or online or anything like that. So this really created a huge change across the organic search results. So I love this video. It's like so assaulting to watch, but I had to throw it in there. So these are the COVID winners, just to talk about like why COVID winners, what's going on with this. So as you guys know, I talk about EAT a lot, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And one thing to keep in mind is that EAT matters most when a crisis is developing. So this is like verbatim from Google's documentation. Basically, when a breaking news event happens, like a crisis, they know that there's malicious actors out there who intend to mislead. In other words, people who propagate fake news. And they're trying to capture people's attention. So there's all kinds of people putting out bad information and fake news and misinformation and spreading that across social media. And Google's able to detect that. So what they do is they prefer factors like authority over something like how recently an article was published, or what are the exact match keywords that are included in the headline of that article. That's kind of like the antiquated way that maybe Google worked, but now that they're so focused on EAT, they want to make sure that the most authoritative content is ranking, especially related to crisis keywords. So I worked with a great company called Traject who gave me this awesome data about who is ranking for COVID keywords. So they sent me results for 1,339 coronavirus keywords, and I wanted to show here just which domains are capturing the market share for those keywords. And as you would probably expect, it's mostly news publications, but beyond that, it's the most trusted news publications, at least according to Google and people who align themselves with Google, as well as the NPR and the CDC. So if you look at specifically what are the highest traffic keywords that are generating the bulk of this market share and these traffic increases for these sites, coronavirus, according to SimilarWeb, was the highest traffic term shared by all these sites, followed by Trump and then coronavirus map, some more political keywords and things like that. But really the New York Times and CNN are going to be the biggest players as it relates to a lot of these COVID keywords. And that's to be expected. They're publishing content, multiple times every day about COVID in all these different places. And Google really trusts these sites. So pretty much every COVID keyword is going to generate a news carousel, top stories. And that's where a lot of this visibility is coming from. I just wanted to add too that CNN and the New York Times, these sites are really, really innovative from an SEO standpoint. So web stories is a new example of something that's probably, 3 months old. And while the SEO industry has been like learning about it, speculating about it, seeing whether it's worthwhile to implement or not, CNN already has a dedicated landing page, and they've had this for 2-3 months, with like all these beautiful visual stories about a bunch of different topics. And these show up in image results. They may even show up in the regular results in the image carousel, and they can get tons and tons of visibility. So my good friend Glenn Gabe, he published one just as a test, and I don't even remember how many impressions, but he got many, many different impressions and clicks from his web stories. So it's just something to keep in mind if you're a news publisher or not. It's a really great strategy. And actually, Google announced a couple weeks ago that the top of Google Discover will now be dominated by web stories. And there's a great WordPress plugin for it, so it's getting easier to implement, but something to keep in mind that CNN's doing quite well. And again, I'm not really going to talk about losers today, but on the flip side of, these highly authoritative news publishers, there's the sites that are conspiracy sites and fringe websites and extremist sites who have seen their visibility decline as the result of core updates over the last couple of years. As you can see, really starting in like 2016, 2017, a lot of these sites like InfoWars and, both ends of the political spectrum. I have Collective Evolution, which is like very, very far left. A lot of different sites that are speculating and theorizing about things like COVID, maybe like Bill Gates and 5G and all these conspiracy theories. They've been wiped off the map in terms of organic visibility. So, two things happening concurrently. We have the rise in EAT from the most trusted publishers and concurrently the suppressing of misinformation in Google search results. And adjacent to that, we also have sites that are seeing huge increases in visibility because they just have great EAT. So we have highly authoritative institutions publishing content about COVID and other medical conditions, official.gov.uk and .org sites. We have data-driven and science and evidence-based websites. And then pretty much all these sites are heavily researched, well-sourced, almost like you're reading a scientific journal. So here we have Medical Express is one of the biggest winners in this category. So if you go and read their about page, it's like overwhelmingly like, okay, we get it. You have scientists and doctors and medical professionals writing your content. They claim to have the most complete and comprehensive daily coverage of the full sweep of science, technology, and medicine news. They write that way. They have their content properly sourced. They have a full team of experts that they list on the website. Every sentence is backed up with data and evidence. And, because of this process that they're using to publish content, they've seen a 359% increase in visibility this year. And they're able to rank number one, or rather page one, for words like virus, which is really, really hard to compete for right now. Bunyan, Percocet Online, Free Radicals, Saffron, and Cancer News, which is also, in light of what Google's doing with EAT, these are some of the hardest keywords to rank for right now. But the real winners of this category in 2020 are the FDA and the CDC, for sure. So Google's been doing a lot as it relates to COVID. So this is honestly not even every update that Google's made. It's probably a lot more than this by now. I just can't fit it all anymore. But Google's rolled out all kinds of new features for businesses to take advantage of during COVID. So whether it be Google My Business updates, which even this week they rolled out a new one where you can actually indicate whether or not the staff wears masks, which I thought is really interesting. But they're doing a ton to be able to support businesses during this time. So there's like new structured data you can use. There's new Google ad requirements. There's all kinds of Google My Business features. And then the search results themselves have completely changed. So you've probably noticed that whether you type coronavirus or whether you type something that relates to coronavirus, or whether you type like, I don't even know, headache, like something that's kind of like peripherally related to COVID, they want to be super, super safe and promote, the most trusted content and eliminate any potential misinformation or unsafe information. So really the way that they're doing that is they're just basically pulling in content from the CDC and the FDA, and they've created a bunch of new search features in the process. So there's like, if you type coronavirus based on where you're searching from, so here in New York City, it's like, here's how many cases you have, here's how many have recovered, here's some local New York City news. On the left, we have what I call the COVID sidebar, but it was rolled out before that, and now they're using it for things like celebrities as well. But it's a nice new way of navigating Google where you can click on, specifically what you're looking for. They have new structured data specifically for companies and organizations that have urgent COVID announcements. So this isn't something that everybody can use yet, but like hospitals and schools and government organizations that have official communications about COVID can use structured data to indicate that as part of the search results. And then all kinds of other bells and whistles that they're using that's really just pulled directly from the CDC. So good luck competing for these keywords. You basically can't. And I call this the wear a mask update, but on June 22nd, we woke up and there was a really big update on Google that they didn't really confirm. But what I noticed right off the bat was like, okay, first of all, in the US, this was when there started to be a lot of controversy around like mask wearing and what's happening with COVID, a lot of fake news and stuff like that. Google pushed out this change where if you look here on the right, you'll notice that the CDC and the FDA saw like immense increases in SEO visibility, especially the CDC, higher than they've ever been in the history of these sites being online. So what does that look like? This is the query hand sanitizer. So in June of 2020, if you typed hand sanitizer, it was Amazon, Walgreens, CVS, and Office Depot, right? This was like the places to go to hopefully find hand sanitizer. I don't remember if it was in stock at that point or not, but it was a transactional query. And then after the what I call wear a mask update, you'll notice that the FDA, as well as some people also ask boxes on Google, but the FDA actually took the position 1 and 3. So what happened is that they were encouraging searchers not necessarily to just go buying hand sanitizer, and probably because by this point there was a lot of like bad hand sanitizer out there, but it was the FDA saying like, if you're going to buy it, this is what you need to consider. Some of the hand sanitizer is unsafe. Don't use these specific products. And you'll see this across the board. It wasn't just hand sanitizer. It was like, another example I found was grapefruit juice. Before it was like health benefits of grapefruit juice, and after it was Google pushing the FDA to say like, don't combine your grapefruit juice with other drugs. So like really pushing safety on its users. So next we'll talk about a potential Google glitch that it may or may not be a glitch, but it's certainly weird. So this is a slide that I had from another deck about how insane and crazy 2020 has been. And I decided for this presentation that I'd throw in the May core update because it honestly belongs on this slide. I think the May core update was horrible. Sorry if you're listening, Google, but it was not good. So if you notice a pattern in terms of who's won the most visibility as a result of the May core update, check this out. So here we have, what, 7 different versions of Pinterest, 2 different versions of eBay, 2 different versions of Amazon, and 2 different versions of Google as like the biggest winners as a result of this update. And this is all in the US, by the way, this isn't global. So here in the US, this is Pinterest Canada, UK, Australia, Spain, I think Switzerland, and Ireland or something. I forgot what those mean. But anyway, if you look at what happened during A, which is the January core update, and B, which is the May core update, all these different versions of Pinterest are suddenly dominating the US search results. So what does that look like? And this happened like right off the bat after the May core update. Someone, Bruno, if you're here, thank you for sharing this with Danny Sullivan. But it was like, Danny, what is going on here? If you type a word, you'll notice like literally every single one of these results is Pinterest. And then on different CCTLDs, and then Danny was like, "Oh yeah, we know it's a problem. Like, you know, we'll get it. We'll get back to you soon. We're going to look into it." And then someone else goes, "I found 17 Pinterest results in the first 2 pages." So on May 22nd, Danny Sullivan said, "We'll look into it," and yeah, it's not really fixed yet. So that's still happening. Also, we have what I've noticed is I had at the time an Indian client, a client that actually services content in India for Indian consumers. But here in the US, they saw a huge increase. And then these are 5 other sites that are targeted towards an Indian audience. And granted, I think they also want, you know, a US Indian audience to read their content. But for whatever reason, they saw a huge increase in visibility during the May core update. So there's some weirdness going on with, I don't know, maybe hreflang changes or just Google deciding that companies are able to rank for the same keyword across multiple domains that they own, which is kind of bizarre because it's not really how it's supposed to work, but that's what's been happening this year. So next, I'm going to talk about stock images. Just a mild warning, this is going to be a little bit not safe for work, not really, but it is what it is because it's what's happening in our jobs. So the first thing I noticed was there's this huge growth in stock image websites. So here we have Shutterstock, Getty Images, and iStock Photo. Over the course of 2020, these sites have seen huge increases. That A is the January core update, and that's continued throughout the course of the year. So I looked into, well, what are the keywords that these sites are ranking for? Like Pinterest.Canada here in the US, what are they ranking for? And Shutterstock, what are they ranking for? okay, well, immediately my eyes, probably like yours, were drawn to the fact that these are mildly pornographic keywords, borderline pornographic, kind of not super appropriate keywords. But that's what made it really interesting, because it's Shutterstock and Pinterest that we're talking about, right? So then I remembered in late 2019, Google actually had an update where they removed porn from like lesbian search results. So if people were doing lesbian queries where they were like legitimately like, I'm lesbian and I want this content, and they were just showing porn. And the same is true for things like curvy women. So when you type curvy women, I have 5 different versions of Pinterest here. So it kind of reminded me, like, maybe what they're doing as a result of this update, where they're trying to reduce the amount of porn, unless the user is literally looking for porn, is by bulking it up with images from websites that are already doing their own vetting in terms of what's appropriate and what's not, because you probably are aware that Google has like teams of human reviewers that look at images to determine whether they're adult content or not. And that's a horribly arduous process, and it's very subject to being, like wrong. Like, you might end up seeing adult images when you didn't intend to see them. So my theory, and this is just purely my own speculation, but maybe they're using Pinterest and the different CCTLDs from Pinterest to fill in the gaps with what used to be more pornographic content, especially for these keywords where the intent is not super clear. So like girls in panties. What did that look like last year? We had a bunch of different e-commerce websites. So I guess the intent at that time was transactional, and Google thought, like, if you type that, people want to make a purchase, they want to buy a girl's underwear. This year it's Getty Images, Pinterest, Shutterstock, and then Amazon. But really what they're doing is they're taking these ambiguous keywords, and I think that they're allowing these image sites to rank their own content, and maybe relying on those sites to vet what's appropriate and what's not. So keep an eye on that. Definitely there's a lot more images in the organic results than there were this time last year. So next, we're going to talk about some more EAT winners. So again, I talk about EAT a lot. If you ever want to know more about my theories and thoughts and everything, just Google it, Lily Ray EAT. There's a bunch of stuff. But basically, these are some of the sites that have done a really great job improving their EAT over the past couple of years and have seen huge visibility increases this year. I was really excited about Diet Doctor. It's not my client, but I've been watching you guys. You guys are awesome. You're doing such a good job with EAT, and you're being rewarded for it, which is really cool. As I mentioned before, these aren't my clients, but they've been investing very heavily in EAT. I've been watching you, and I'm like a proud mama, even though I probably have nothing to do with it. But here's an example of how I use the Wayback Machine to see what's happening with these sites that I don't work on before and after they made changes. So what I do is I go back in time and I see, what did the website look like before? What did the page look like after? And you can see all these examples of them hiring doctors to review the content, them sourcing their claims better, just fixing up the content across the board for like thousands of articles, and they're seeing big performance gains from that. So what have they done to improve EAT? So, it's a lot of different sites that I look at, but across the board, everyone's improved their About Us pages. They're more transparent about who their brands are. Drastically improved the content quality. They have reduced a lot of fluff content, not great content, and just made sure that real doctors and expert reviewers and everything like that are reviewing the quality of the content. They've updated their facts and figures, implemented better policies for sourcing the content, substantiated claims with evidence. So if you say like, studies show that heart attacks come from a deficiency and blah, 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 they actually put the source of where they got that information from, which might have not been the case before. They've removed underperforming content. They've consolidated content that's duplicative or thin or just not great. And then they're a lot more transparent with their users. And beyond that, these companies are getting fancy with their SEO strategies in general. So ZocDoc is a great example. They've seen 148% increase in visibility this year. And I like to use the Right Structured Data Testing tool, which is pretty awesome. It's a browser extension that you can basically just click on and see what type of structured data is being used on the page. So in this example, ZocDoc is doing this across the board. What they're doing is they have a page that lists out a bunch of doctors. So that's why here for the structured data, you're seeing all these different physician names. They're also using medical web page to describe the main purpose of the page. And then they're using FAQ schema, which is my personal favorite schema. They have FAQs on top of the physicians and everything that are generating the star ratings. So now their search results are like just humongous, and they fill in that content dynamically. So you can see here, like, how can I find a doctor for pulmonology consultation who takes my insurance? Like, that's all customized based on the page content, which is a requirement for FAQ schema. You can't just have the same thing across the board in every page, but they've benefited greatly from this, and the search results, they just look a lot better than their competitors. So great job, ZocDoc. Next is e-commerce. So the biggest e-commerce winners, shocking, Amazon.com, Target, eBay, Overstock. This is Amazon's growth and visibility over time, and I just wanted to overlay them compared to Target, eBay, and Overstock. You can see they're just like absolute monster compared to everybody else on the internet, and that's only gotten more extreme this year. They're an example of do as I say, not as I do. So don't look at Amazon as your source of SEO truth. Just because they succeed at something doesn't mean you should do it. They can get away with whatever they want, and they continue to be number one for everything. So unfortunately, that's just our reality. Here's an example of that. And sorry if you do SEO for Amazon, I'm just being honest. But basically, Google says, for example, consider blocking, preventing Google from being able to crawl dynamic URLs or internal search results, right? That's like in their documentation. Amazon ranks number one for so many keywords that are internal search result pages that have enormous search volume. So backpacks, like one of the highest volume transactional keywords on the internet. Amazon's internal search results page for backpacks is number one on Google for that keyword. Multiply that by all the transactional keywords out there. That's how Amazon wins. So don't go doing that necessarily, but just know that that's what's happening. Now, if we look at somebody who's not Amazon and what they're doing, I looked at Joss & Main. I wasn't familiar with this website. I used to work in e-commerce a lot, and haven't been doing it as much lately, but seeing what Joss & Main is doing, it's very clear that they're being so thoughtful with their SEO strategy and their e-commerce strategy. There's almost too much to read here, but every bell and whistle you can possibly imagine as it relates to what you would want to see on a product page, they have all of it. So free shipping, customer photos, thousands of reviews about the product, upsells, cross-sells, product highlights, Q&A with like dozens of questions, shop the look, great structured data, like so much information about a throw pillow that it's like overwhelming, but clearly it's working for them. So congrats to that team. Next is real estate. Just really quick, I did notice that a lot of like new players almost in the real estate space started to see big increases in January. Property Shark, I'm a little skeptical of you guys. I looked at your link profile and I think that there might be something going on there, but the other sites are doing a lot of very white hat, great SEO strategies. So Compass, for example, great high quality images, great usability, fast load times. They have this amazing system where they basically include like HTML sitemaps for the specific neighborhoods that they sell homes in on the homepage. So it's like super crawlable for search engines, really robust neighborhood guides, great attributes about every property. They have dedicated landing pages for each realtor and a lot of information about them and their social media handles and everything like that. So awesome job for that company. Yeah, so that's it. A lot of information, but just to summarize a few things, EAT matters more than ever, especially if you're going after your money, your life, or controversial or crisis topics. Pay attention to changes in search intent, because a lot of the time you didn't do anything wrong. It's just that Google or the market decided that the search results are going to change. Leverage all the latest features like FAQ schema, web stories, Google Discover, and all that good stuff. And then just know that a lot of the biggest players on the internet can get away with breaking the rules. It doesn't mean that you should do that, but that's the reality that we live in. So awesome.
Well
Thank
done,
you so
Lily.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We actually have a couple questions for you before you sneak off.
Oh, I'm not going anywhere. I have wine to drink.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Well, the first one comes from our very own Holly Miller Anderson.
Hi, Holly.
She wants to know, how do you anticipate Google will adapt search to consumers' needs in 2021? A vaccine may be on the horizon. More
work from home. At first, I thought it meant what the hell. Curious to hear your take.
How will Google adapt to 2021?
2021 consumer needs, yeah. Especially
Consumer
like
needs.
the ambiguity.
I mean, I think that Google's algorithms are programmed in a way where they respond to, I mean, they claim that user experience and click-through rate and those things are not like how the rankings are determined on Google, but a lot of us disagree with that. It's going to be reflective of people's behavior. So I don't know, if the vaccine comes from, what's one of the companies, Eli Lilly or whatever, like that site's going to start ranking really, really well because they have a page about the vaccine. So like, it's like the market kind of, controls the outcome of what happens on Google. So it's impossible to say. It depends on world events.
It'll be very interesting. Next up is not a question. It is a shout out from B. Frazier, just saying,
Yes.
just a massive shout out to Lily for a remote SEO team at Path Interactive.
Love you. Love you guys.
Then Andy wanted to point out from earlier on in your talk, it'd be nice to talk about SEO from Pinterest's point of view. We can reach out. They have some good product engineers like Kwani, and I can't remember some of the new ones there. They're kind of quiet. I don't think we see Pinterest talking at a lot of conferences. Have you
Why
run
would
into them?
they? They're having a great year. They don't have to do anything.
And then the final was from Brian Bearden. He wanted to know if you could share that WordPress plugin that would help with the news layouts like CNN.
Yeah, it's actually an official Google plugin. I believe it's just called Web Stories for WordPress. Look for like the official WordPress plugin for Web Stories. I don't remember the name, but it's something like that.
Right on.
I will agree too, by the way, like just working at a large e-commerce website, like GoDaddy was always treated differently than a lot of the other guys that were out there. I mean, just getting away with a lot of the spam tactics that I did. But it is true. Like Amazon is completely treated differently. And I would almost gather to say that, like, I would say that someone or a team over at Google internally regulates the larger sites versus like algorithmically the smaller ones, right? And so they're just treated in a different manner. I mean, if I'm an Amazon or an eBay or whatever, and I'm spending 40 million, 100 million a month in PPC advertising, I bet you that buys a little bit of leeway with things as well. So
they claim that it doesn't, but who knows?
Yeah, whatever. They claim a lot of things, but you never know. Well, thank you so much for the talk. Obviously, right now, we're going to be heading into a short little break. TJ is going to throw some stuff on the screen. You guys get up, stretch, grab a drink, whatever you need to do. And we'll be back in a short another question. Another question. Well,
there's the WordPress plugin, by the way. It's in the chat.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, the last question that just came in with FAQ schema. I've had coworkers worry it'll impact CTR because people are getting answers before they actually visit the site. Is that something you think we should worry about?
Google Lily Ray FAQ schema, and you'll hear all my thoughts about that. Yeah, it absolutely happens. You have to test it. So check your FAQ schema in Search Console. You can actually click that as a filter and see what your click-through rate looks like once you've rolled it out. But you can also put links in your answers, so that helps to mitigate any losses that you would get in click-through rate.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Lily. We really appreciate it. Great talk.